Most people believe attention is a moral muscle. You strengthen it through effort. You sharpen it through discipline. When you fail to focus, you assume you've failed to try hard enough, that somewhere inside you there's a deficiency in willpower, commitment, or character. Monks operate from a completely different assumption. Attention is a side effect of design. They don't sit in silent meditation for hours because they have supernatural self-control. They sit because the entire architecture of monastic life, the bells, the routines, the silence, the identical days, makes attention the path of least resistance. The monk's attention is not a victory of will, it's a triumph of systems. This distinction matters because most productivity advice focuses on the wrong variable. It tells you to try harder, want it more, believe in yourself. And when you fail, it reinforces the lie that you lack something essential. What monks discovered centuries ago, and what neuroscience is only now confirming, is that attention failure is rarely about motivation. It's about environment. The brain that evolved to be distracted cannot be forced to focus. It can only be redesigned. Your brain is a prediction machine. It evolved not to focus deeply on one thing, but to scan the environment constantly for threats, opportunities, and social information. This wandering, scientists call it the default mode network, is not a bug. It's a feature. It kept your ancestors alive. The problem is that this feature works perfectly in a chaotic natural environment. It fails catastrophically in the modern environment, where you sit still while infinite stimuli compete for your attention. Your brain wants to wander, and your phone wants it to wander, and your inbox wants it to wander. You're the only force arguing for focus, and you're arguing alone. This is why willpower fails. Not because you're weak, but because you're fighting against a system, your neurobiology plus your environment, that is actively optimized to pull your attention apart. Monks solve this not by becoming tougher, but by becoming smarter. They built an environment where wandering is harder than attention. They removed the choice. Consider a day in the life of a novice monk at a traditional Buddhist monastery in Southeast Asia. The bell rings at 4:30 a.m., not sometimes, every day. The novice wakes, robes himself in the same cloth, walks the same path to the meditation hall, and sits on the same cushion. Around him sit 30 other monks, all sitting still, all facing the same direction. The hall is silent except for the sound of occasional bells and the instruction of the master. For a new monk, this is torture. The mind races, the body aches. Attention fragments across 1,000 concerns. Did I leave something undone? What time is it? When does this end? Is my knee supposed to hurt this much? The novice's first response is to white-knuckle it, to try harder, to force the mind still through pure determination. This fails. Within 2 weeks, most novices who rely on willpower alone quit or become miserable. But the ones who stay begin something different. They stop fighting the mind. Instead, they fight the environment. They notice that at the same moment each day, when the bell rings and the senior monk rings the gong, attention naturally settles. Not because they want it to, but because their body has learned the pattern. The brain recognizes the signal. Prediction kicks in and focus follows. They notice that after 30 days, the ache in the knee bothers them less because their nervous system has downregulated the alarm response to sitting. The mind wanders less not because they've become more disciplined, but because the wandering has less to grab onto. In silence, with no screen, with no novel input, the brain's craving for stimulation gradually quiets. They notice, though they wouldn't phrase it this way, that their behavior has shifted their identity. They're no longer trying to be the kind of person who can sit still. They're becoming that person from the inside out. By month 3, attention feels easy. The bell rings and the body moves. The cushion calls and the mind settles. What took months of friction to establish is now automatic. This is not mysticism. This is neuroscience observable at the cellular level. When you perform an action repeatedly in the same context, your brain builds something called a context-dependent memory. The environment becomes a trigger. The trigger automates the behavior. Attention, in this framework, becomes automatic too. This process involves the basal ganglia, the ancient part of your brain responsible for habit formation. When a behavior repeats with consistency, the basal ganglia gradually takes over the cognitive load from the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that requires willpower. The action goes from conscious effort to unconscious pattern. This is why an expert athlete can sink a free throw while talking to a teammate, and why you can drive home without remembering the drive. The brain has automated the pattern, freeing attention to flow elsewhere. Monks accelerate this process deliberately. They repeat the same actions in the same environment until the context itself becomes the cue. The meditation hall doesn't require willpower. It requires showing up. The brain handles the rest. Meanwhile, modern life does the opposite. Your environment is randomized. Your schedule changes. You meditate in different rooms, different times, different contexts. Your brain never builds the automaticity. It stays in conscious, effortful mode, and conscious willpower is a limited resource. There's another layer. When you sit in the same place at the same time with the same people day after day, your nervous system downregulates its threat response. The amygdala, the brain's alarm bell, stops firing as much. You're no longer in constant low-level vigilance. Your brain can finally relax into the environment. This is what scientists observe in long-term meditators: reduced amygdala reactivity, increased EEG synchronization between regions of the brain, and measurably increased gray matter density in attention-related areas. These aren't small effects. These are the kinds of structural changes you see in elite athletes. But here's the crucial part. These changes don't come from trying harder. They come from repetition in a consistent context. The design does the work. The novice's job is simply to show up. There's a cognitive phenomenon called attention residue. When you switch tasks, your attention doesn't switch with you. A part of your mind stays attached to the previous task, draining your cognitive resources. This is why multitasking fails so spectacularly, not because your brain can't do two things at once, but because your attention lingers on the thing you left behind. Monks eliminate this entirely. Their days are structured so that one thing ends clearly and another begins. A bell rings. The meditation session concludes. The next activity starts. There's no ambiguity. There's no residue. Your attention completes one cycle and moves cleanly to the next. In the modern world, this almost never happens. You're in a meeting and your email is nagging at you. You're trying to focus on work and a Slack message pings. You're with your family and your phone is on the table. Your attention is always partially elsewhere, always carrying the ghost of the last task. Monks designed around this reality centuries before cognitive psychology gave it a name. They made it structurally impossible to be in two places mentally. The silence removes competing inputs. The schedule removes competing choices. The community removes competing concerns. What remains is space. Clean, uncontested space for attention to actually work. Here's the paradox that most people miss. Monks don't start motivated. Motivation comes after the repetition, not before. A novice doesn't arrive at the monastery burning with spiritual desire. He arrives because something is broken in his previous life, or curious about this way of living, or sent by his family. The motivation to meditate is often weak or absent, but something remarkable happens through repetition. After a novice has sat through 100 meditation sessions, his body recognizes the pattern. His nervous system calibrates to it. His brain begins predicting it. And once the brain predicts something, it develops an appetite for it. This is how habits become desires, through repetition, not intention. Watch an experienced musician. They don't play their instrument because they force themselves. They play because the repetition has wired their brain to crave the activity. The body knows what it wants because the body has felt the reward thousands of times before. Monks understood that motivation is a lagging indicator. You don't wait to feel like meditating. You meditate until meditating feels necessary. You repeat until repetition rewires your reward system. This inverts the typical self-help model which says, get motivated, then take action. Monks say, take action repeatedly and motivation appears. One is dependent on an initial spark that most people don't have. The other is dependent on showing up, which anyone can do. You don't need a monastery to access these principles. You need to think like a monastic designer. Same place. Choose one location for deep work. Make it boring. Make it consistent. Let your brain build the context-dependent memory. The location doesn't matter. A specific chair, a specific coffee shop, a specific desk. What matters is that it's always the same place. Same time. Choose a time slot and defend it. Your brain is a prediction machine. Predictability builds automaticity. If you work at different times every day, your brain never settles into the pattern. If you work at the same time every day, the rhythm becomes automatic. Same ritual. Remove the decision about how to start. Monks ring a bell. You might pour a specific drink, light a specific candle, or play a specific song. The ritual is a trigger. It tells your brain this is the context for focus. Your prefrontal cortex can relax. The environment is now in control. Remove choice. This is the hardest one because we're conditioned to believe choice is freedom. But choice is also cognitive load. During your focus session, remove options. Close the browser tabs. Put the phone another room. Delete the distracting apps. You're not being harsh. You're being wise. You're removing the friction that would otherwise pull your attention apart. Shrink the goal. A novice doesn't sit to achieve enlightenment. He sits for 1 hour, then another hour, then another year. Monks are radical about accepting incremental progress. They don't demand transformation on day one. They respect the process. If you can't focus for 2 hours, focus for 30 minutes. If 30 minutes feels impossible, focus for 15. The goal is not to be impressive immediately. The goal is to make today's session slightly easier than yesterday's through repetition and design. The fundamental insight of monastic training, what makes it work better than willpower, is that it outsources attention to structure. The bell rings. The attention follows. The monk doesn't have to be strong. The system is strong. In a monastery, structure does 90% of the work. Willpower does 10%. Willpower is there for the genuinely hard moments, the days when the body aches or the mind rebels. But most days, willpower never has to fire. The system moves the person forward. Modern life inverts this ratio. We rely on willpower for 90% and structure for 10%. We expect ourselves to generate motivation internally while fighting an environment designed to shatter focus. Then we blame ourselves when we fail. Monks aren't special. They're not more disciplined or more spiritually evolved than you. They've simply built an environment where distraction is harder than attention. They've removed the choice to wander. They've made the right behavior the easy behavior. This is not mysticism. This is engineering. You won't transform your attention overnight. The brain doesn't work that way. But if you design your environment, if you repeat the pattern, if you respect the slowness of neuroplasticity, something will shift. At first it will feel forced. The same room will feel boring. The same time will feel restrictive. Your mind will fight the structure because the structure removes the stimulation your brain has learned to crave. But here's what happens next. Around week 3, you'll notice the bell no longer feels like external force. It feels like permission. By week 6, you'll find yourself naturally moving toward your focus space at the scheduled time. Your brain has begun building the prediction. Around week 12, attention will start to feel less like work and more like simply what happens in that place at that time. This is not willpower. This is training, and training, unlike willpower, actually works. The monks knew something that modern productivity culture forgot. Attention is not something you force. It is something you train, slowly, gently, and inevitably. You train it not by trying harder, but by redesigning the world around you until attention becomes the path of least resistance. This knowledge has persisted in monasteries for thousands of years, not because monks are special, but because the system works. It works because it works with the brain, not against it. Build your bell, sit in your place. Let the pattern teach you. The attention you're looking for is already there, waiting to be trained.